Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Reviews where today we have ourselves an album from an act named Marcus M. Positive Parker. This is titled Grown Folk Business. Now if we switch over to here, I have been asked today to review the first 7 minutes of an album. Now this is a very unusual thing for me. Usually I review tracks or I review an album. To review 7 minutes of an album is a lot more complicated than usual because I've got to kind of summarize like maybe 3.5 tracks today. I think there's 4 included in that time frame. We have we're basically finishing around Thank You, I think. So we're doing basically 3 or 4 tracks today, and that's not bad. It's just an interesting thing to get that far in an album but then stop. But anyways, look, we're going to listen through the first 7 minutes of this album from start to finish, and we're going to hear what we think. Let's go. I think we got the intro.
Hey, man. I want to thank everybody out there for checking out the album. This is Grown Folks Business. Your boy Marcus Parker, as you know, I started out doing this, man, making music, going to school, speaking at the high schools and middle schools across North Texas. And teachers was like, man, you would do so much better if you would rap for the kids, because that's all they, really kind of focus in on. So I started making motivational rap. 2004, 2005. So, it's been 18, 19 years now. And so now I go back and I look, sometimes I run into some of those same kids I used to see in school. And now they're adults. Now they got kids. Now they're married. They're dealing with adult issues. Relationship issues, parenting, you name it. So I thought it would be appropriate for Marcus Parker to get back on the microphone and make an album that was adult.
I mean, it's nice to have this backstory to it, to understand where Marcus M. Positive Parker has come from, as you don't always get a real good grasp of who the artist is, even if you listen through an entire album of their work. I have been reviewing Marcus's work for a while. I do typically enjoy it, and I think the purpose of the music is good, and the quality, and by good, I mean not that it's good quality, because I think in general the stuff's been pretty high quality, but what I mean is it's also a situation where it does the world good. It's a net positive for the messages that are spread throughout those stories and how they affect people. I think they're positive things for people to be talking about, and it seems like we're doing it for a great cause.
Album that was for grown folks. Make an album that will teach you how to deal with the stuff in life, man, that we trying to deal with. Because we got too many issues out here, and a lot of people are not telling us how to fix them. But that's what we gonna do right here. So this is Grown Folks Business. I hope you enjoy.
Okay, and just before we get into Grown Folks Business, basically the situation here is that the intro was just a nice little introduction to the kind of music that Marcus does in regards to the motif. We had the trappish drums there with the interesting 8th and 16th note grooves there. We had some of the keys there as well, a nice mid-range coloration, and some of the synths and siren sounds, etc. Some of that old school hip hop combined with some of the more sort of contemporary elements there. It's good. It reflects the journey I think that Marcus has come from, not only his inspirations, but also what he's learned about the industry and how to write and produce music over the last 18, 19 years. But it seems very authentic and genuine, and I look forward to hearing what we have next for Grown Folks Business. Interesting use of those vocal chops on the sides.
Cause this is grown folks business. Grown folks, See, this is grown folks business. Grown folks, See, this is time to get some breakfast, but ain't nothing in the fridge. Meant to stop last night, but got too busy with these kids. We try to be respectable, take care of where we live, and deal with daily issues like it is what it is. We wake up knowing
Daily issues like it is what it is. It's that sort of down to earth, rhetoric, that lyricism there. I think it will, people find it relatable who are in similar positions, and that's again the point of this music. But also, just how effortlessly we come in with the instrumental arrangement at the beginning. knowing that we're comfortable with the level of production that insinuates that the vocal performance is probably going to be on par with that. It's just a nice way. It's not, and it's also not a cheesy motif in the background. Sometimes with music like this, it can come across as a bit disingenuous because you're trying to be too happy and pumped up and positive. But I suppose that we're trying to sort of work within the genre that a lot of the people we might be chatting to sort of listen to, you know, as per the original one said that they listen to rap music and everything like that. And so you've got to kind of find a way to make it sound great whilst also, yeah, it's just finding that equilibrium tonally, you know?
If it ain't one thing, then it's another. Low key, you really a superhero undercover. And I don't want to look at them bills trying to eat dinner. Life can make you feel like a loser when you a winner. See, the biggest lie I told was that life was gonna be easy. And you can check your blood pressure if you don't believe me. Cause it's hard enough to stay up out of trouble. Keep your hustle, you adulting so you understand the struggle. Cause this is grown folks business. Grown folks, See, this is grown folks business. Grown folks, See, this alarm goes off.
I mean, I'll go back a little bit to play that verse again, but what I enjoy here is the use of the organs on the sides, but most importantly, I suppose, it's the vocals in the center and how the grown folks kind of repeats on the sides. It feels in the stereo field really well. It's very compelling. You follow along to it. The 808's nicely tight in the low end, sidechained well by the kicks and the percussion there. Some other mid-range melodic harmonic elements there that are sweetening things up. Maybe some short little kind of string bits, whether they're synths or actual strings, I'm not sure, but they're dope. They're really good.
But you know you still tired. Gotta get up so I don't end up getting fired. Day after day, week after week, we still stressing. Rent done went up and it's getting a little depressing. Now we gotta deal with traffic and rotating tires. Trying not to get tickets, registration expired. People dating, people loving. Some got one up in the oven, and we supposed to figure it all out. Like it ain't no folks' business. See, this is grown folks' business.
And that sound there is a nice sort of onomatopoeic thing. Fills in the space really well as with the delays as well. Allows the listener a bit of respite before the reiteration of that hook line.
This is grown folks' business. See, 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 this is grown folks' business.
I mean, like, it's just fantastic just before we continue with Thank You. It's just great to see him actually performing them, actually rapping in these videos, because you don't often get to see the artist either, you know, in a situation where you're just following them actually rapping on a mic. A lot of the time with a lot of the videos I've seen across a wide variety of genres, it's very rare you just get a dedicated look into that. But we definitely have that here. But I mean, with the story in mind, you know, talking about everyday stuff that people have to deal with, including the stuff about loving and dating and, you know, being pregnant and everything like that, and just the struggles and just trying to cope. I almost think it's a great thing to have after the intro, where we were talking about trying to sort of like help people when they become adults and helping them to prepare them for the real world, because that's all the stuff we're going to have to deal with. So chronologically, that's a good sort of part of the journey to start with, which is why I think Thank You, because I've reviewed Thank You before. I think that's a good way to follow on with.
Surprise how 2 little words can change somebody's whole day. Just saying thank you. You know, I appreciate you. Little words can change somebody's whole outfit.
Great use of vocal filtering.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I know they rarely say it, but it should be stated. Cause you've been on your grind forever, playing your role to make our lives better. And you see the single mother trying to maintain with a teenager at home who always complained. Wanted a PlayStation, so she got him the game. Still constantly complaining, driving her insane. She talked to him about it, but it stayed the same. Said he wanted what he wanted, and he called her lame. Till one day she got laid off, eviction came. Messed him up because he realized he caused the pain.
When all he had to say was
thank you, I appreciate it. I know they rarely say it, but it should be stated. Cause you been on your grind forever, playing your role to make our lives better. Thank you, I appreciate it. I know they rarely say it, but it should be stated. Cause you been on your grind forever, playing your role to make our lives better.
I mean, like, it's not just the fact that we have, like, the 808s and the samples like we do on the kit. It's also the boom, boom, boom. Like a really simple, again, organ or keysh motif as a sub layer there, making it sound nice and warm. It sounds a little bit more hopeful, and it sounds a little more graceful than what we had previously. But there's all this wah, 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 wah kind of thing switching around with the cymbals in different positions of the stereo field. There's so much effort to try and keep it compelling for the listener without departing too much from the core concept. I think this allows Marcus a lot of room to be able to do what he does best on top, and it's stylistically and tonally consistent, and I appreciate that within an album.
I know you see the job that looks over your drive. Even the relationship you keeping alive. I see you in the background keeping it stable. For your loved ones, you're always ready, willing, and able. We don't check up on our strong friends, it's sad indeed. And sometimes we only call when we fall in need. People stressed out, I'm talking all across the nation. And I know these two words may not fix every situation, but don't lose your patience, because I promise if you keep on looking forward, you gon' reach your destination. But if nobody ever say it, don't feel defeated, cause this song might be exactly what you needed. Believe it. Thank you, I appreciate it. I know they rarely say it, but it should be stated. Cause you've been on your grind forever, playing your role to make our lives better. Thank you, I appreciate it. I know they rarely say it, but it should be stated. Cause you've been on your grind forever, playing your role to make our lives better. Thank you, I appreciate it. I know they rarely say it, but it should be stated. Cause you've been on your grind forever, playing your role to make our lives better. Yeah. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay, at this point, like, I don't mind that we're repeating a hook. It might have been nice to have had an alternative lead layer or something like this, a little bit of a change with the way things are presented with the accompaniment, just to justify a repeat of the outro like this. It's a compelling message, don't get me wrong. I appreciate the sentiment behind it. I think people do need to be told that we are grateful for them and stuff like that. Just regards to the actual composition and performance, an additional lead layer or something that changes in the outro, aside from that vocal cuts that we had just before, would be good.
I know they rarely say it, but it should be stated.
Okay, we are including. Okay.
Playing your role to make our lives better. Thank you.
Okay, so I think that the song was strong, just before we, finish with thank you, because we have technically reviewed the first 7 minutes of this album. The song, thank you, was great. It's literally just that I don't know if we necessarily needed that final repeat of the outro chorus. I think it could have been good without it. I'm not necessarily sure what it added to the experience. I think filtering the vocals would have been a nice way to finish it. I know that we've done that in previous tracks, or that may have been something the listener would expect at this point. But nonetheless, you could have even added a nice little kind of maybe an instrumental outro with another lead on top of that if you wanted to have as a fade out or something like that. It's just little things. I mean, this is the only real thing that kind of sticks out to me. Everything else is dope. But yeah, we'll talk about that in the conclusion. And welcome to the conclusion of my review of this album, Grown Folk Business. It's the first 7 minutes of it, and I just have to say, in general, I'm really happy with it. I think that we did a great job with the album, at least from the first 7 minutes or so that I've heard. I think that the story that we're telling in this, because what is this album about? I mean, effectively, it's about helping adults deal with the issues that they come across, and I think that Marcus does that incredibly well. His experience over the last almost 20 years, 2 decades, is showing here. I think that he's found a niche that he's very comfortable in. The storytelling seems very authentic, down to earth, and it seems very kind as well, like he genuinely cares about what he's doing. And I have to show some genuine appreciation for that. It can be very difficult to come across as sincere when you're making music like this, especially when you know there's an audience for it and potentially a career to be made off of this stuff. You have to also genuinely care about the people that you're trying to communicate with, and I think that Marcus does. After all, I think for him, he was recommended to actually start doing this music in order to be able to reach people. So it's great. And I think that the stories in here with Grown Folk Business talking about what they've got to do, in order to get by with all the struggles and troubles that people have to deal with, as well as thank you with a lot of people who have to deal with those issues not being thanked, from like parents and kids who don't understand what their parents had to do for them, so they're grumpy when they don't get everything they want, etc. I think these are real life situations that Marcus has been able to elaborate on and put forward in a medium which I think comes across really, I think it's something that, again, a lot of people will be able to relate to and maybe find a bit of solace in being told thank you, that they are appreciated, and that even if they're on a journey which seems thankless, that eventually they'll be able to get some appreciation and gratitude for what they have accomplished. I think that with this, with the intro as well, kind of elaborating on what the point of the album was in the first place, which I think was a smart idea. You can't always get away with that without giving away the whole point of the album, but I think, with the title being Grown Folk Business, you can kind of put two and two together. And I like that Marcus told us a bit more about himself, sort of elaborated on himself and what he does in his journey, but more importantly, talked about what he wants to accomplish within it, which is the value that will be present to anyone watching this. I'm glad that we had both of those in check. And it's cool. It's a good way to do things. I think that the vocals from Marcus were great. Not just the rapped part, which had a great rhythmic sequencing and flow to them. We're clearly comfortable on the microphone now. We are able to express ourselves eloquently and genuinely. The storytelling that we do is very down to earth, but also creative and, good humored considering the subject matter. And I think that we did well to be able to not only create really nicely detailed structured stanzas and lines within the verses, but also to create hook lines within the choruses, which are memorable and interesting, and you can repeat them without there being any issues. Like, you can kind of nod your head along and you remember them because they are memorable and there's a bit of melody to them, and they have the interesting sort of bit repeats on the sides as well, and the bits of vocal filtering, because we know we need to change the sound of the vocals occasionally to be able to keep the listener interested if you present things in a slightly different way, but with a familiar pattern. People are like, oh, that's different, but not too strange, It's just a way of leading people down a pathway in a way that's mutually beneficial when you're writing a tune and performing it, and I think that we handled the vocals well. I don't think there was a note or a syllable out of place there. So yeah, I think that we also seem genuinely passionate about what we're talking about. So I think there's a great connection between what is required in the story as well as in the vocals. I think that we sounded like we were patient and kind and caring, and that's just, you couldn't have succeeded with this type of music in any other way. It just wouldn't have worked. So well done for finding that. I mean, the tracks themselves at around 2 to 3 minutes are solid. They're a good length. They're well within that 2 to 4 minute sweet spot. That's the typical kind of length that people seem to appreciate nowadays. Longer than that, and you really have to justify it. Shorter than that, and you're in for a bit of a rough time. I think that, short of that, you're in for a rough time. What I mean is, I just don't think there's enough time to elaborate, like to talk about how to describe it. It's more like we are telling a story and we need time to progress it, and we need to not give all the information straight away because it may be potentially overwhelming to a listener. So we need to have at least a couple of verses to be able to expand upon it. And I think that is the benefit of having that 2 to 4 minutes there. And so we had a couple of verses per track, and we opened typically with the hook line to get the person interested and get the crux of the track. We didn't give too much away, and that's the beauty of having a clear purpose for the verses and the hook. You're not just relying on people to be vibing to the hook. You really want to get them to care about everything else. So I think that the structuring was solid as well. We had a nice sort of sense of patience and confidence within the backing motif as well, with a combination typically of keys, drums, bass, some synth parts, some vocal chops as more sort of synthetic instrumental effects, maybe some other sort of synth leads as well, We maybe had some other keys, maybe some guitar parts or something like that. We may have had other instruments as well. There was a lot going on within the arrangements, and I think that the strength of that is that you had unique themes that were not too minimalist, but simultaneously gave Marcus room to speak on the mic. And I think that that is an extremely difficult thing to do, because when you've got, like, for instance, in the verse sections, we typically took away a lot of those high to mid elements there, and we've mainly focused on some of the area sub elements like the pads or the keys, and we just had the drum kit in the lower round to continue an established groove like the 8th and 16th, etc. But then also in the main hook lines, everything came in. We had like double tracking of the vocals, and we had movement to them. We had space as well, some repeaters as well, which was good. We knew how to affect the dynamic range of the tracks so things were in the same loudness all the time, so that there was like ebbs and flows, and that makes it more interesting for listeners because it's not the same loudness or the same intensity all the time, and people will continue to remain intrigued by stuff if that occurs. And I think the beauty of that length is that with the verses and choruses and the instrumental intros, with the exception of the thank you track where I feel we could have potentially not had the last chorus repeat, I think that genuinely these are well paced. I think that, you know, with the drums, with the intricacy of those, with a lot of the cymbal work having a lot of finesse to it, especially with thank you. Like, I was listening to those hi-hat hits and other sort of parts in the center of the stereo field, and they were really intricate. They were really interesting. You weren't just relying on eighths the whole time. And you have variations and little rests and stuff like that. The bass line following the whole note routine there, but nice and balanced in that low end. And add a bit of crispiness and a little bit of grit to it. You know, it was a little bit spicy. You know, it pushed the compressor a little bit, but I think that allows a bit more sort of heft and mood to it and weight there, and there's a nicer floor for everything else to stand on. The keys and everything in their mid to high range, and the synths, as well as anything on the sides of the stereo field that kind of swept away or came in or sequenced or fluxed there was good. And ultimately, you then had the occasional syncing or unison notes within some of the lines within the melodies of the hook, which were there simply, or some repeats of like parts, or some onomatopoeia again from the vocals, like the kind of sound. Those, and you've just got a lovely combination of elements within each of the tracks that is not the same for each song, so it doesn't sound monotonous, like, you know, textural or tonally monotonous, but it's just enough where the complexity is constant, so you can associate them within the same album, if that makes sense, with the layering and stuff like that. But I think that the motifs in general, for growing folk business, it was a little bit more down to earth, like recognizing the struggle that people were going through. But I think we never allowed things to become too dark. If anything, it was more somber and accepting of the situation we're in. With Thank You, there was more of an open-ended question to it, as if you're being invited to respond to being told that, you know, thank you. It's almost like it was inviting you to consider that maybe it is worth continuing even if things are difficult, because the results will eventually pan out, and you may not be aware of just how much people are thankful for your existence in their lives, even if they don't know it. That's my interpretation of the motifs of this track. I think that the intro motif, which is sort of fairly neutral, it wasn't a simple sort of backing, but it was enough to kind of establish a mood, introduce a lot of the instruments we're going to have later on, and ultimately, it was very satisfying. I think finally, the studio production, it was solid. I don't really have any complaints about it. I think that Marcus did a great job of getting the vocals nice and present in the mix, you know, with the takes. They were really solid vocal takes, you know. It seemed like we were, again, like he had his eyes closed when he was rapping a lot of the time. He clearly knows his lines, which is awesome. So the performance was tight, but also the rest of the instruments and the arrangement were nicely niched within the frequency spectrum and the stereo field. There were no resonant frequencies. The drums and bass were nice and tight, side-chained when needed to be. Anything else was notched so that it didn't interfere with the low frequencies like the keys, the strings, the synths, etc. Especially in mid to high range, things would move between the parts of the stereo field, like the vocals when the backing would go to the sides, and you know, grown folk business, it would go from the center to the sides, and there'd be sort of automation with the panning, which was kind of dope, and it would continue to loop that, which was very satisfying with a break in between. And again, there was dynamic range not only in the composition but also in the studio production as well. Things weren't too close to the ceiling there, the loudness ceiling, but it was also nice and low without pumping, so the bus compression and limiting was handled well. I mean, effectively, this is a very promising album from Marcus and Positive Parker, Grown Folk Business, and I wish them the best of luck in future, because this is my review of this visual album. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please go check out their various social medias and their YouTube page, and stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as either hell more than ever thought of crazy stuff going on in the world, and I'll catch you in the next review. Spiderhands out.